This show contains explicit language and themes and is for entertainment only. We do not guarantee the accuracy of our content. This podcast is not for sensitive individuals, ideological or religious extremists, or little bitches.
I'll be so glad when the sun goes down.
Had I anything to do with the Negro, I would confine them by strict law to their own species. Prophet Joseph Smith Jr.
I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down. I ain't all that sleepy, but I wanna lie down.
Welcome to the Unholy Generations podcast. We are your hosts, two first-degree atheists from the Satanic Illuminati Atheist One World Order. I'm Brother Michael.
And I'm Brother Blood. Today we're going to be recounting our journey into the center of Mormonism in the Woodlands, Texas. So kind of right off the bat, Michael and I didn't know anything about Mormonism more than what the South Park episode could tell us.
Yeah.
So we were very confused and there was a lot of vocabulary and background assumptions that weren't covered in that episode that kind of just...
But to be fair, I mean, that the episode was actually pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Like, the portrayal of the Mormon story, like the origins of the Book of Mormon, were pretty dead on, actually.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want a good starting point, start with that.
Yeah, it really seems like anything that was said during this visit to the Mormon church could have been taken in the context of that South Park episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much fit the narrative, so at least we had that going in, but there was kind of a lot of stuff they said that I guess the vernacular was foreign, so it did, like, a lot of stuff, it took me a second to kind of catch on to what they were talking about. It wasn't totally dissimilar to a lot of the stuff you might hear in, like, your average Christian church, but the way they were using the phrasing and their vernacular was a little confusing as to what they were talking about.
Looking at just the stuff that I've collected, some of them, I got their use of the term spirits, which was definitely a lot different from every other church that I've been to. So basically what they mean by that, I'm taking this from Listverse. So the way that they define spirits is that it's very unique to the LDS faith. Okay. Basically everyone on earth was a spirit, and in the pre-existence, when we die, our spirits are separated from our bodies. And if we were good, they go to spirit paradise, and if we were bad, it goes to spirit prison. The spirit world exists as a place for spirits to go when they're awaiting the second coming.
So is there like spirit sodomy in spirit prison?
Well, I guess no, you don't. You need a corporeal body to sin, I guess.
So there's no like spirit shankings or shivings? Is this like a normal prison, or do they go hard, you know?
I completely missed what you were talking about. Oh, yes. You can get a spirit prison degree. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's
the next thing that, we might have heard about this before, but just a little bit more explanation on Jesus visiting America.
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is...
So this is also from the same source. The Book of Mormon is a book of LDS scripture that takes place during the same time as the Bible, I guess the Old Testament, and the resurrection and stuff like that. Okay. And it takes place solely on the American continent. And it follows the story of two tribes descended from the family of Lehi. After Jesus' resurrection, LDS people believe he visited the people of America.
Oh, okay. I thought he went to heaven.
Well,
apparently he went to America.
One thing, interestingly, that when I was in my Catholic phase, I was listening to a radio program called Catholic Answers Live. And somebody who was an ex-Mormon, who was a current Catholic, called in and asked, in between the time that Jesus was resurrected and when he went to heaven, couldn't he have visited the Americas? And the guy's answer, and this guy's usually pretty sharp, Jimmy Aiken, I believe his name is. He's usually, pretty sharp and spot on when it comes to theology. Yeah. And he said, well, it doesn't say what he did. So it's possible.
I guess. I mean, didn't he like die, go to hell for like a weekend, and then was resurrected?
No. He went to hell when he died, and after 3 days he rose up, and then he was there for 40 days, but it doesn't really say what he was doing for those 40 days.
So he's just tooling around in America, I guess.
Exactly. He's
okay.
visiting Puerto Rico.
Oh, God.
Oh, what was the story with that guy? Do you remember? The guy who said that he was Jesus' brother or son or something?
Yeah, so for anybody listening, if you've ever seen the Religulous movie with Bill Maher.
Ah, that's what it was.
Yeah, he interviewed a guy out in Puerto Rico who's like convinced he is Jesus's blood relative. And when Bill Maher's like, why would you possibly think that? This guy lived in the Middle East and you're in Puerto Rico. How does that work? The guy was basically like, oh yeah, no, if we follow the bloodline, look, he had like a chart, right? And he's all like, here's Adam, and then here's Abraham, and then David, and then Joseph, and then Jesus, and then he went to Puerto Rico, and then there's me.
That's perfect. Hey, it's consistent, you know? This guy could have been Mormon, and it would have fit just perfectly.
I guess. He was in this weird cult-like religion where they basically treated him like Jesus. So they're like, well, Jesus died, so I guess this guy's the next best thing. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Da Vinci Code when they found out that girl was his long lost daughter or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was stupid. Okay, so another assumption that they had was the nature of God.
Okay.
And they were talking about God in weird ways that I never would have found in other churches that I've been to. Mm-hmm. Very, very anthropomorphic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the reason for that is, quoting from the article, while most religions believe in God, the LDS religion believes in God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit as separate beings. And they also believe that God, Jesus, and resurrected beings have bodies of flesh and bone.
Okay, yeah. When they gave us some literature, which was actually an entire book. It was the Gospel Principles study book.
Yeah.
And in the first chapter, it talks about the nature of God and actually says that his eternal spirit is housed in tangible body of flesh and bones. They have a scriptural citation. It's not from the Bible. It's from one of the, not the book, Doctrines and...
Doctrines and Covenants.
Covenants, that's the one. Doctrines and Covenants. So apparently they have some biblical reference for this.
Well, so in the Bible, God is always anthropomorphized, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not anything particularly, but I guess they take it literally.
Yeah, but it's interesting because like that in itself is kind of a point of contention in the whole Abrahamic religion sector, because that's where kind of the Muslims are looking at the Christians like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Allah cannot be a human. Like, if it's human, it's not Allah, because Allah is completely transcendent from anything in the human realm.
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, like they describe him as an infinite being, so trying to reduce him down to a human is blasphemy in the highest order.
Yeah, and so the reason that I kind of agree, you know, from a storybook kind of standpoint with the Muslims is that if God is confined to a body, then he's, you know, exactly that. He's confined.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of contradicts the idea of the omnis, you know. He can't be omnipotent if he's...
Exactly.
If he's a corporeal being, he can't be...
Well, more importantly, omnipresent. He can't be omnipresent if his entire being is in one body.
Yeah, but I would really like to, when we talk to those... Missionaries, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can talk to them missionary style about this. Okay,
right on. That'd be a good Q&A point to go off of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting that they believe that an infinite being can be housed in a finite body.
Mm-hmm. And then the last one that came up a lot, just kind of their background thinking, and this was actually brought on by you when you asked if Mormons believe in hell. They actually have this kind of idea of a multiplicity of heavens. Mm-hmm. So they have a doctrine of 3 heavens, which are the celestial kingdom, the terrestrial kingdom, and the telestial kingdom. So the celestial is the highest, where God and those who followed his law reside. So if you gave them enough money and got married and had kids... Yep. And we're a dude. The terrestrial is the Middle Earth,
okay,
where people who followed the law of Moses reside. and the telestial is the lowest, where the ones who followed carnal law reside. Carnal law,
like they were just cool with doing whatever.
I guess so. I guess if you follow the law of your senses, I guess, and
of your penis.
Yeah.
The sense of your penis.
and your desire for caffeine.
And pork.
Okay, so this is something that I didn't even know about, Michael, this next one.
Yeah.
Is that Joseph Smith actually has a translation of the Bible.
Well, that's not too surprising. Okay, that I can see that, because Thomas Jefferson also deconstructed the Bible and kind of wrote it in his own image of what he thought it was. But what did Joseph Smith do with it?
Yeah, so the difference here is that he really kind of didn't translate it at all. Basically, he took the King James version and he modified it in ways that fit with his theology. So the problem with that is that he had already written the Book of Mormon, and that has a lot of references and direct reflections of the King James version of the Bible. Yeah. So when he went in and did his little translation of the King James Bible, it ended up contradicting the Book of Mormon.
What? How does that even happen?
Because it's religion, man. Anything goes.
I mean, you think if he's going to edit something, he's going to be, like, very attentive to, like, okay, make sure this narrative fits this narrative, but I guess not. Like, he must have been like, oh, it'll be fine. They're too stupid to figure it out.
Maybe he was the Donald Trump of his time. Like, he could say any two contradictory things and whatever he said goes because, just his fucking attitude kind of dictates that.
I guess. I heard he was a charismatic guy, so maybe that's how he got away with it.
Yeah. So, just for clarification, that was from Mormon Think, which I think it seems like an opposition website or an anti-Mormon website, so take that for what it's worth, but I also just thought it was funny.
I mean, usually, like, websites that are critical of the stuff that they're talking about
are usually right.
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot of research, so they make sure that they're right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to be fair, they probably did more research and has a lot less, like, sophistry bullshit than you might find on a LDS-funded website, so just keep that in mind.
Michael, we have a bad religion segment right here.
All right.
So, you saw the Avengers Age of Ultron, right?
Yeah.
So, that movie where the technology basically becomes superhuman and kind of,
sentient,
maybe godlike. Yeah. Were you at all confused about who the villain was in that movie?
No, it was pretty clear that Ultron wanted to kill all the humans.
Oh, okay.
That was a bad thing.
Well, apparently there seems to be a little bit of confusion about that because this guy, Anthony Lewandowski, he's trying to start a new religion. So, the former Google and Uber executive who is notorious for the self-driving cars said that he wants to start a new religion based on a deity that will be built of highly advanced artificial intelligence. And he's going to call it the Way of the Future, which totally doesn't sound like any kind of comic book villains group or anything like that.
No.
So...
It kind of sounds a little like the Order of the Jedi.
Yeah, I was thinking more like the Hive from Teen Titans. I guess we'll know if he starts calling himself Brother Blood.
Yeah.
So Lewandowski says that the realization, acceptance, and worship of a godhead based on AI developed through computer hardware and software. That's their goal. It strikes me as very dangerous. That's the beginning of every single futuristic sci-fi horror movie, especially with this guy's background too. Like, he was a Google executive and stuff like that, and he's been accused of corporate espionage.
Yeah.
So he's in the middle of a big lawsuit right now. That's like opening scene right there. So he says about this hypothetical AI, quote, "I would love for this machine to see us as its beloved elders that it respects and takes care of."
Or it just sees us as worthless meat puppets and kills us.
Exactly. I think he's a little bit too optimistic about it.
So, like, he's in charge of the whole, like, self-driving cars, so, like, the first models are gonna be, like, the Stephen King novel Christine.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, like, killer cars.
Oh, no, it could be more like Transformers as well, like a whole bunch of self-driving cars just, like, abandon their drivers and just form together into Megatron. Well, I mean, if it came down to it, I think I would rather, if it came down to either Transformers or Age of Ultron, I'd much rather have Ultron than Transformers. I'll take that. Yeah, so this church is going to have a sort of Bible, and it's going to be called
The Manual.
The Manual.
The Manual. I wonder if it has yearly software updates.
Yeah. What kind of God is it that needs yearly software updates and also has a kill switch? What if your God got a virus?
Yeah, right. Could he die? Could you kill God with a virus?
Yeah. No, that's the inciting incident of when the AI goes bad is when it gets some malware.
Oh shit! It's gonna be Terminator, you guys. Like Judgment Day is coming. Oh shit! The article ends with, "What if God was a robot?"
Dun dun dun.
Okay, so let's talk about our visit to the LDS Church. Let's just start off with some first impressions here. Everybody was really, really, really friendly.
Yeah, it went beyond even the Pentecostal church that we went to. Like, everybody there was super, super friendly, but only certain people would stop to talk at us, like maybe one or two people every time we really talked to us. But this time, I don't think we had a conversation with one person that was shorter than 5 minutes, at least.
Yeah, no, everybody came up to shake hands, say hi, is this your first time? Are you guys thinking of, coming here next Sunday? We got so many invitations to come back next Sunday. Like, it feels like the entire community is geared towards recruitment as soon as they see a visitor. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, and then again, like, it was super spot on, the South Park episode, when it comes to a portrayal of the Mormons, like that little kid and the family.
Yeah.
It was all, they were all like super enthusiastic about everything.
Yeah, especially the Book of Mormon. They were all super into the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, which, I hadn't even come across people that were that enthusiastic about the Bible.
Right?
Not even the Pentecostal church, but, that's probably the one that I would compare it to the most. But it was definitely, I would definitely rather go back to the Mormon church than the Pentecostal church.
Oh, yeah.
If I wanted to, like, hang out with the people.
Oh yeah, no, everybody there was pretty cool, pretty neat people. So that was the first thing we noticed. The other thing, it was a very mixed age demographic.
Oh yeah.
Lots of versatility and lots of kids. Lots of kids, anywhere from like old people all the way down to like little kids.
Yeah, and I heard that Mormons have a lot of babies. That doesn't bode well for a sermon.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later, but we didn't know that we were sitting in the crying baby section.
Yeah, so that sucked. The other thing was they have a lot of titles. Like, there is a very strict hierarchy within the Mormon religion that we sort of found out about the longer we were there. We were able to sort of piece together the hierarchy.
Yeah, and it seems like all the males participate in it. They didn't talk about females at all, but I assume they have maybe something analogous.
Yeah, something similar, but maybe not quite as predominant.
Like honorary titles.
Yeah, honorary titles. So, from what we were able to decipher, we don't know if this is 100% right. We might look this up later, and we're actually going to be talking with a missionary later on, so we might actually ask him about this. But from what we could decipher, the little kids, like, I think he said like 3 to 6, those are referred to as deacons.
Was it that young?
Yeah, I think so. It's like the smallest possible age group. It may have gone up to 8 because in Mormon religion, where there's like a cutoff age where you are now responsible for all the sins you commit.
Yeah, the age of reason.
Age of reason, that's it. That's 8 years old. So it may have been like 3 to 8 are deacons. Mm-hmm. And then 8 until about like the tweens or 13, somewhere in there. Those are referred to as priests. And then the next age group up, I think, is like kind of the teen age, right before you turn 18 and you're basically an adult. So between like 13 to 18, give or take. Those are teachers. And then once you're an adult, you are an elder. Mm-hmm. And then after the elders, the person who is in charge of each individual church or in charge of the ward, basically is what they call it. They call it a ward.
Yeah, the ward is like the diocese or the district.
Exactly. That is called a prophet. Mm-hmm. And then above that is a state patriarch. And he's in charge of basically all the wards in the state. And we'll talk about that later. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, first of all, it just sounds funny. Like, oh, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm the state patriarch.
Right. And then I think the top levels of the religion are the presidents. And they're like headquarters, I guess. I don't know where the presidents reside.
Yeah, I think they're the successor of Joseph Smith or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know they have like modern day revelation, so like the ongoing prophecy. I think that's the guy who does it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Well,
well, I mean, in terms of the hierarchy, it makes sense. In terms of reality, it does not. So we went in for one of their Sunday sacraments, and the sacrament is the service. That's what they call it. And it was 3 hours long. Mm-hmm. 3 grueling fucking hours.
God, I mean, I said I enjoyed it, but
it was rough.
You know, by the time the 3rd hour came around, I was actually about to doze off right there in that little small group.
Yeah, it was rough. So the way they divvied up the sacrament is in 1 hour chunks, and you spend the first hour in the sanctuary. You spent the second hour with kind of a small group of kind of mixed gender, and then the third hour you spent in another small group that was specific to gender and age. So we were in the male elder group meeting there at that last hour at the end. Mm-hmm. Let's start with the first meeting, which was in the sanctuary. That's the first hour you get there with everybody in the same place.
Yeah, so the sanctuary itself was pretty large, and there was no...
it was huge.
Yeah, there was no artwork or anything like that, but...
no iconography, none whatsoever.
Yeah, and even the altar, or the place where you would see the altar, kind of just looked like a movie theater row of seats.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. It was like just one row.
Yeah, it was a bunch of people. Basically, everybody who had something to do with the sermon was up there. I wondered if there was some kind of council of elders, because there were 3 people who were directly involved in the service, and then another 4 people who didn't really seem to do anything, but they were treated with some special reverence that the other 3 weren't getting.
Maybe they were auditing.
Maybe. I don't know. Fuck if I know. Let's see. What else we got here? So... there was not a lot of racial diversity, let's say.
Yeah.
a lot of white people. A lot of white people.
Yeah, so in a very, very white town in East Texas, you go into a church and you see a couple, there's a lot of Indian people, sure. A lot of Asian people, not really a lot of black people. In this church, it was pretty much all white, except for one interracial couple. Mm-hmm. There was a black girl and a white guy.
Yeah, and to kind of give you some context, the area that we live in, it is predominantly white, but a few years ago they were opening up a gas company headquarters, so there were a lot of people moving here from like India, China, Japan. So the town does have some racial diversity, but if you just judge this town based on this church alone, you would not know that. You would have no idea.
Yeah, that oil and gas headquarters didn't last, by the way, as far as I know.
No, it closed down. Anyway, so sanctuary was huge. All the people were white. All the paint was white. So that kind of matched up nicely.
Yeah.
It was really, really clean and well maintained. Like, I think they must have refurbished that recently at some point, because it looked brand new.
And also, we should mention that the sanctuary was half sanctuary, half basketball court.
Yes. Apparently, there were so many people, they needed to pull back. They had kind of one of those collapsible walls that you wheel in and out, and they had to push the collapsible wall back, and behind that was a basketball court, and that was like the fourth and fifth rows of seating. That's where we sat.
Yeah, they set out little picnic chairs for that.
Yeah.
But apparently that doubled as the baby section.
Yeah.
And that's where we sat.
Unfortunately. We chose unwisely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what else we got here. So one thing we found out was that at this church there are no, like, paid management or ministry positions. Like, there is no priest or minister or clergy, nothing like that that's on payroll. Everything is volunteer, and as a result of that, pretty much every position in that church that's a position of leadership, they're all voted in by the community. So we were there to actually witness that.
And it's all volunteer based.
Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. Nobody at the church is getting paid. It's all volunteer work. So that's different.
Yeah, so on one hand, the way I think about that is that it could possibly be a good thing because it kind of leaves behind a lot of monetary motivations for getting into ministry.
Sure.
But then, on the other hand, it's kind of exploitative because, I think it was your mom was talking about how they do the same thing in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
Where you have to do a lot of things and they make you pay for it, basically.
Yeah.
And they don't give you anything in return.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is something that I can kind of relate to a little bit. So in the martial arts world, there's this kind of practice, and I've been in martial arts ever since I was a little kid. And over the years, I got trained to be an assistant instructor and then a full-on instructor and so on and so forth. And now I'm teaching self-protection kind of on my own and for a separate company. So it's pretty much, that's how I make my living. But there is sort of this practice that you don't really know exists unless you're in that world. But basically what happens is running a martial arts school can be very difficult for the one person who owns it, So because there is a kind of a built-in hierarchy within that school, of the belt system, and there are certain people who are at certain belts and they're, more experienced, they've been there longer, they're lots of them usually are training with the aspirations to be an instructor. So what you do is you basically get free labor. So, I don't know if you guys have seen that episode of Penn and Teller Bullshit where he was talking about martial arts, but he actually talks about this, and he was talking to this guy who owns his martial arts dojo, and he sees people out there and they're like cleaning the mats and they're like washing the windows and teaching classes, and he's like, so are they getting paid? He's like, nope, completely volunteer.
Yeah, volunteer.
Yeah, and then you talk to the
Fucking
people who
assholes.
do it, and you see this guy, he's like, I've been in this dojo for 4 years. And he's like, really? He's like, yeah, I am now trusted with washing the mats and instructing classes. One time, my sensei told me he needed someone to take over his evening class, so I drove 4 hours in the rain to open up the dojo and teach. And you got paid for that? No, I did not.
Yeah, that's pretty much how this is, except without all the cool punches and shit. It's just you get to read a book and do public speaking.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's actually a pretty ingenious business model from the standpoint of you don't have to pay anybody. So, but it is very exploitative.
Mm-hmm. Especially since, I assume that since it's kind of set up on the same district organization as the Catholic Church, that there's got to be a lot of money coming from on high.
Oh yeah,
to support these people.
Yeah,
but I guess that goes into outreach and there's a lot of charity going on at this church and stuff like that, and building maintenance, not paying for people to work there.
Yeah. So everything except salaries, pretty much. I imagine it's what their expenses look like.
That's shitty.
Yeah. It is exploitative. You're right. But anyway, moving on. Oh, they had, kind of like the Catholics do, they had an offering of bread and wine. Like at the Last Supper, when Jesus is like, "This is my body and this is my blood." Except they didn't do wine.
Yeah, in the Catholic Church, it's the Eucharist.
Yeah, that nasty ass cracker.
Yeah.
Which,
it's not
hey,
even salted.
Right? No, if you're Catholic and you're like, hey, I hate the nasty ass cracker, this might be a good alternative because you get pieces of real bread. Like it's actual bread. It's awesome.
Yeah, they do it like the same way as the Eastern Orthodox, where in this place they actually employ child labor to do it. I think it's the little tiny kids, the priests
the
or
like
whatever.
The deacons and the priests, I think, are in charge
but
of that.
they get a big old piece of bread and they pick it apart and they put it on different trays, and then all the little kids come around and give it to you. Thankfully, not with their stupid little grubby hands.
Yeah. Oh, no. They have to bless it first. So they have, like, the teachers pray over it, and then the little deacons and priests go around and hand them out. It's very important. You got to pray over it. Can't forget that part.
You know, I thought the Pentecostals and the Baptists were kind of shitty for doing it with bread and grape juice, but these cheap fuckers just use water.
Just water. Just tap water. Wasn't even bottled.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I appreciate the Catholic Church for, is at least they got wine. Like real wine.
Yeah, you know, they spent some money. It was nice. It's nice.
Yeah.
Leaves a good impression, you know? So, yeah, bread and water. That was interesting. Now, the other thing that, to me, was a little unnerving was when they were doing this, immediately, I guess they prearranged these roles, but as soon as they went into this bread and water thing, there were like 6 people who just got up and they were guarding the doors like bodyguards. Like you couldn't leave, or it was weird. And like, just me and my background, and I teach people self-protection and everything, I immediately see 6 people get up and block the doors. I'm like, what the fuck is about to happen?
Okay, so honestly, that is what I thought of at first, because they were big guys, you know, the big guys that got up and blocked the doors. But what they were actually doing is opening the doors for people who wanted to come in and out so that it wouldn't make a noise.
Okay, that makes sense, I guess. But still, like, it was like, being new there, it was a little unnerving. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you know, the big old Mormon bully kids were standing up and blocking the doors.
So then we get to the actual first part of the sacrament. So again, there are no paid positions at this church. They don't even have like a priest or a minister or a pastor or anything like that. So the first part of the sacrament is basically people coming up and speaking, and there's typically 3 speakers from what we came to understand. And we didn't understand this at first. We thought these were like actual people who were paid clergy and you know, they were trained to do this. So it was a little surprising at first.
Yeah.
Because none of the people who came up were very strong public speakers.
Yeah, well, I kind of thought it was a little surprising that a woman came up, because I didn't think that any churches suffered that.
Yeah, because obviously if she can speak in front of a church congregation, she must be a witch. So, you know.
Of course.
we have to stone her to death.
Yep, if she's heavier than a church sermon.
The bitch is using magic. So yeah, they were not, you know, people who were necessarily trained to speak publicly. So some of what they were saying was kind of hard to follow because sometimes the organization wasn't great. They weren't very strong public speakers, and since they'd stutter a lot of ums, a lot of ahs, a lot of kind of trying to find their place. So, but we were able to kind of pick apart the main points and the main point of what their speech was about. So the first one was kind of a younger guy. I think he would technically be considered an elder. His whole thing, he was kind of talking about dealing with hardship, and he kind of came at it from a few different angles, like personal hardship and helping others in need, you know, kind of a few different angles. And one of the main things he talked about is he had this story about in the Houston area, we recently got hit by Hurricane Harvey. And southern Houston got it really, really fucking bad. Like a bunch of people's homes underwater and everything's just fucking wrecked to shit. Apparently this Mormon church does a lot of like outreach and a lot of community service stuff. So I don't know if this was on behalf of the church or just him and his dad or whatever. It was kind of like a South Park episode where they're all like, hey, we can take the extra Rice Krispies treats, wrap them up and give them to the homeless. Yay! It was kind of like that, you know?
Yeah, exactly like that.
So I think this was more like a family initiative. So they went down to the, you know, hurricane torn apart southern Houston, and they were helping this lady who lost her home. And she was saying, like, he was saying that she was really kind of upbeat and very positive for having just had her home destroyed. And so they asked her why, like how can you be so positive? And she was saying, well, you guys are the answer to my prayers. I prayed to Jesus that people would come and help each other in this time of need, and you guys are the answer to my prayer. So,
well, was it regular Jesus or Mormon Jesus?
Mormon Jesus, yeah. Ooh. Ooh. Dun, dun, dun. But that was interesting. Mm-hmm. But that was pretty much the main chunk of what he was talking about. But there were a couple of things that I thought was interesting. So because we went into this without, again, knowing a whole lot about Mormons, there were some of the vernacular that we didn't fully understand. One of that vernacular was, he was talking about bearing your testimony or bearing your personal testimony. It seemed like what he was talking about was bearing your personal testimony of how you were moved by the Spirit, which is basically the Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
It seemed like what he was talking about, because they said they did it regularly.
So I forget the context, though. Was it like, was he talking about like being moved by the Spirit to help this woman, or just more general, like being moved to the Spirit to become a Mormon or become strong in his faith or whatever? Because that's the context I'm used to.
Yeah, and I know what you mean. Like, your testimony in typical Christian circles is like how you came to Jesus and your conversion story and that kind of thing. That's more common. Mm-hmm. This one seemed more general, like what the normal usage could also apply, like how he became a Mormon, but it sounded like there was another usage there where it was kind of more like it would happen more often, because if you were like moved by the Spirit, and the next person we'll talk about, the next reading, the lady talked about how the Spirit like revealed truth to her. And it seemed like when they say bearing their testimony, it could be like sharing that experience kind of deal. Like it can be both, you know?
Yeah. Makes sense.
But yeah, so back to the kid. So the elder was talking about, he said something I thought was interesting, how he believed that you needed to be humbled and brokenhearted in order to receive Jesus. I had heard the humbled part. Humbled is common. Brokenhearted, that's different.
Yeah, like, do you have to recently have broken up with your boyfriend at 14?
So I guess Jesus is like the rebound guy, you know? Like
yeah, Jesus is the rebound.
He's just waiting to get you when you're all down and depressed. Oh, my girlfriend left
the
me.
sad thing is that's probably like more true than we want to believe right now.
Right?
It's like, I just broke up with my girlfriend. I guess I'll go to church and be all sad there.
Or like when we were watching The Case for Christ and he was jealous that his wife was with Jesus. It was like, was I not enough for you? Yeah. You had to find another man.
You're cheating on me with Jesus.
It's kind of like that, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So apparently Jesus is the cosmic rebound guy, just waiting to catch everybody as they come out of a bad relationship.
Yeah.
Thought that was kind of funny.
Uh-huh.
So let's talk about the second reading here. This one was from a lady, and about half of her speech was like build up to the point. Again, the organization wasn't great here. She started to kind of talk about the point of her speech. She didn't get to it. She decided to go back to the beginning of this big, long, drawn-out story that really didn't go anywhere. And then finally she sort of talked about what she meant to talk about, and then it wasn't super clear. So not a professional public speaker, but I was able to kind of piece together what she meant.
And I wasn't, because my kryptonite actually is bad public speaking.
Yeah.
I literally zoned out of everything that she said. I had no idea.
It was very jumbled. It was difficult to follow, but I was able to, through my notes, kind of figure out what she meant. So she starts off with a story, kind of a parable. I don't know if this is in the Book of Mormon. This is the first time I ever heard it. The story of the boy and the two shoes. So basically, there's this boy, two boys, and they find a pair of shoes. And they're just sitting out there for some reason. They don't question about why these shoes are out here or who they belong to. But anyway, they find these two shoes, and one of the boys is like, hey, we should steal them. And then the other boy is like, nah, we should leave money in them. So, of course, they put money... Right. He won't know what to do. So, of course, they put money in the shoes, and they go and they hide in the bushes. And the man comes back, who apparently he's the owner of the shoes that he just left there for some reason. So he comes back and picks up his shoes, and he finds money in them, and he is just so moved by seeing money in his shoes, he just drops down on one knee and starts thanking Jesus, which if I found money in my shoes, I'd be like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm going to go to the Coke machine. Like, I wouldn't even stop to think about Jesus, but apparently this guy, super religious.
Yeah, I should start leaving my shoes out somewhere.
Right? In hopes that people will leave money in them. So this story, I don't see the connection to the rest of her speech. It was just there.
I don't even see what the fucking moral is. It's just like, do good things and people will thank Jesus.
I guess.
Instead of you.
I don't know. There was a part, I think I remember her saying the boys felt good about what they did. So maybe it's like, if you do good things, you get warm fuzzies from Jesus.
Yeah. No fucking shit. Like, I did a good thing.
I don't know.
And that's the moral. That is the rest of the story.
Yeah, so this story doesn't seem to really connect to the rest of what she was saying, at least from what I can see in my notes. I don't know why she told this story, other than she likes it.
Mm-hmm.
So then she talks about the rest of her sermon, which at the beginning she said it was about the Spirit impressing principles of truth upon people.
Uh-huh.
And this, I think basically what she means is like, when she's taken by the Spirit, sometimes the Spirit reveals semi-universal truths, or maybe truths that are only relevant to her, or it was kind of unclear. But she talked about tuning into heaven to be able to receive the Spirit more often and be revealed, or have more truths revealed to her on a more regular basis.
Did she say what frequency it was?
It was like FM 666.
That's the wrong channel, Michael.
It's counterintuitive. You would think it's not that one, but it is. So another kind of vernacular that was thrust upon us that we didn't really understand at first was feeling the Spirit in abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've heard people say they were filled with the Holy Spirit, but I've never heard it phrased that way.
I think it just means like really, really, really getting the religious feels.
I suppose so. Getting those Jesus good vibes.
I mean, that would make sense, and that's the only thing I could think of it meaning.
Yeah, me too. We'll have to ask the missionary.
Yeah.
So then she was talking about, when you're tuned into heaven, you're able to receive messages. Sometimes these messages have a lot of profound truth or something. Then this is where she digresses into something that really wasn't that closely related to what she was talking about. Apparently her son is on a mission trip overseas, and she would talk to her son every once in a while, and they kind of made a joke. I forget where he said he was.
I think he said he was in China.
Oh, China? He said China? Something like that. Maybe in an Asian country, South Asia, something like that.
Yeah.
So he was out there, and he was learning the language, and he was like, oh, the gift of tongues is real, Mom. We kind of thought that was a little funny.
Yeah. And I heard that, and I was like, oh, thank God. They actually believe in the gift of tongues in a realistic way.
Like, imagine like a Pentecostal like demonstrating their gift of tongues in China.
Yeah, I would love to see a Pentecostal missionary go over to China.
La 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 la, ching chong, ching chong.
I got the gift of tongues. Ching chong ching.
Oh God. So that would not end well. It would be like, I think this white person is deranged or high. I can't decide.
Or, it would end well, depending on your perspective.
Well, yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So apparently she was talking to her son, and he said something that struck a chord with her, and it was to remember the purpose for doing things. And she was basically saying, she sort of related this to preparing yourself to receive the Spirit, and that was the purpose of something in her speech that didn't connect very well. She said this, and then she didn't really connect the dots for us. We were just sitting there with these two seemingly unconnected pieces, and she really didn't draw us a very clear bridge between these two pieces of, receiving messages and being tuned into heaven and purpose for doing things. And finally she ended out with inviting the Spirit into your life. Again, not super great organization here.
So preparing yourself for the Holy Spirit,
yes.
Is that like a holy water enema?
Maybe. Could be. Depends on how frisky the Spirit is feeling that day.
Yeah, you gotta let the Spirit penetrate.
Getting that Vaseline up in there. It's all primed and ready to go.
Hey, is that what those crucifix dildos are for? Is that what that is?
I think that is the spirit penetrating you. The spirit moves your hand to the dildo.
Did you ever see that it was like a fleshlight, but it was shaped like a Bible? And
I
it was
did
called
see
the
that.
Or the Bible
The
Thumper.
Bible Thumper. Yes, I did see that. Oh, that's fantastic. So anyway,
is this fucking lady done yet?
almost. So she made an analogy about how we need to prepare to invite and receive the Spirit. Mm-hmm. She kind of related it to when she was trying to move a desk in her house. And she was like, this desk needs somewhere to go, so I'm going to clear out this space and then move the desk there. And that was her analogy. Her big analogy was like, if you're, getting ready to receive the Spirit, then you need to, like, move stuff around spiritually inside of you so you can receive the Spirit. But not in a dirty way.
So it's Mormon feng shui.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
So that was pretty much the end of that.
Whatever.
It was, again, not super strong public speakers here, but it was enough to kind of decipher some of the points she was trying to make. Mm-hmm. And then the third guy, I had the most trouble deciphering him, mostly because he kept crying the whole time, and I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Yeah, so along with the babies screaming in the background, and also, the guy, you could tell, he said his family was going through some rough times,
I think
so he was
divorce.
just very emotion-filled this whole time.
Yeah.
But that being said, I couldn't gather anything that he was saying, really. Like, were you able to get any notes?
I made some notes. Some of them don't connect very well. It could be because I didn't understand what he was saying, so I couldn't take notes well enough to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. But in general, I kind of remember his talk being more, garbled and not super well connecting like the ladies.
Well, I don't know. This is coming from the guy who heard the word sacrament as sacrament.
Hey, they can't enunciate. I kept hearing sacrament when they would say sacrament. I was like, oh, is that what you call it? That's weird.
Yeah, so I don't know if I'd trust your hearing abilities now.
Well, that's all you got, so... So he made a few appeals to the divine plan, and he kind of was on the same path as the first speaker when he was talking about dealing with hardship and, if you're having a hard time, just hang in there, Jesus will get you through kind of thing. Or he said a few times that if you're in a storm, the storm will pass, you just hold on, and apparently the Book of Mormon and Jesus are an anchor for you to hold on to during hardship. That was a big part of what he was talking about.
Book of Mormon is made of paper. Doesn't really make a good
Yeah,
anchor.
no, it just fly away, so the logistics of that.
And Jesus is probably pretty bloated by now.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, decomposing gases.
Maybe he went to the all-you-can-eat buffet with the heavenly Buddha and, packed on a few pounds. So that was kind of the main gist of what he was talking about, is dealing with hardship and how being a part of the church helps you get through it. So I made some background notes off of that. Mm-hmm. He talked briefly about the atonement and, how Jesus went through a hard time and he just stuck it out, but of course he died. So I don't know if that's a great, analogy.
Oh God, that reminds me so much of the Book of Mormon, the Broadway musical.
Yeah.
Did you ever listen to that or see it or anything?
I did not get to, no.
Yeah, there's just one song sung by Josh Gad called Man Up. Mm-hmm. It's basically like it starts out with saying that Jesus got up in that cross and he stuck it out.
Then he dies though. He dies. Like that's a terrible analogy.
Yeah, but he died like a man.
Okay.
No, he died getting penetrated
with a spear. With a spear.
That's kinky.
He felt it in his stomach. If you don't know why that's funny, you need to go research the spear that pierced Jesus' side. And that joke will make so much more sense. Okay. Anyway. The other thing he talked about a parable of a lost sheep. I think I vaguely remember what he was talking about. It's in the Bible. I read over it the other day, actually, when I was doing research for the 23 Minutes in Hell segment.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Jesus was talking about, or maybe it wasn't Jesus, maybe it was Paul, I forget. The parable was about a shepherd has all these sheep, and he loses one of his sheep, so he leaves the herd to go and find this single sheep. And then he finds it and he rejoices. He puts the sheep on his shoulders. And then he walks back to the herd and they all rejoice together. Actually, it was Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was Jesus because he told another parable about a king and 2 sons and all that.
Yeah, so just by the way, in the story, the parable, like, that seems kind of not the right thing to do. Like, if you lose one sheep, you leave all the other
Yeah,
ones.
like, that's a very irresponsible shepherd.
Like, what if a wolf comes around? Or...
I mean, sheep raping is a thing. Like,
That's not what I was getting at all.
The point is, very irresponsible shepherd. Bad shepherd. Bad.
Well, I don't know. Was the flock in Wales?
It could have been.
Or Scotland?
I mean, Middle East, goat, sheep, they're close enough.
I don't know. The Middle Eastern pubes get caught up in the wool. You know?
That felt a little racist. That.
Oh, you shut the fuck up.
Okay. But, yeah, that was pretty much all I gathered from that. But, yeah, so that was pretty much it for that. So then let's move on to the second phase of this whole ordeal, which was the small group meeting. It was an elder group, so we were with the adults, but it was mixed genders. So some boys, some girls.
Yeah, so it was elders and whatever women are.
Yeah, so we got in there, and there was this super cute girl who I sat next to, so that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of those times where I experienced someone who was like really into the Book of Mormon, like super enthusiastic about it. So the small group meeting was basically where they talked about, they read from this book called The Gospel Principles, and they actually gave us copies of it to take home with us. So we got a bunch of literature.
Yeah, so this is kind of like a synthesized version, or an abbreviated version, of, I guess, the Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah, well, I mean, what it is they boil down all the basic ideology into one book. So it's easy to understand. They outline all the important stuff, and they give the biblical and Book of Mormon citations, so you can go look it up yourself.
Yeah, so thankfully it's only like 120 pages, so don't be surprised if that pops up again.
Yeah, we might do segment pieces on this. It's pretty funny, so we'll see. Maybe that's something to explore in the future. But I remember specifically there was a couple of readings from the Book of Abraham, which I think is Book of Mormon, and the cute girl sitting next to me, she was like, "Oh, these are really cool." I was like, That's never a phrase I have associated with reading the Bible. It's really cool.
It's not something that I usually associate with Mormons.
Yeah, but she was like really into it. She's like, "Oh yeah, these are great." I was like, that's weird.
Yeah, so admittedly, she was probably, 18 or 19.
I think she was 19.
She was getting ready to go on a mission to France, which I think is pretty fucking cool. So, in that stage of your life, I can definitely relate to being extremely enthusiastic about the holy books and the religion and stuff like that, because that's kind of where I was at that point.
Sure. I'm kind of debating whether or not I should make a tap that joke, because while I am fairly confident she will never hear this, and she is 19, giggity giggity.
No, Michael,
no,
don't do it.
No, don't do it.
Especially since the guy leading the meeting was her dad.
Her dad. I will admit, one of the first things I thought of when I heard that, I was like, "Oh, damn, cock blocked."
Oh, Michael.
I'll admit to that. That was on me. That's on me.
You know what was a much bigger cock block?
Huh.
The fucking religion.
The Book of Mormon. The biggest cock block.
All of it. I don't know. Fucking Mormons probably are the same kinds of people who like fuck through a hole in the sheet with the lights off.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's actually like it is the biggest cock block, because you got the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Book of Mormon, and the Doctrines and Covenants all stacked together. So you got to penetrate
the
all
Pearl
that.
of Great Price, which Pearl of Great Price is not a metaphor.
But I mean, you gotta penetrate all the way through that before you can get to that sweet clam meat. So that's a pretty good cock block.
Yeah.
So anyway, we sat into this small group meeting, and they gave us our gospel principles book. And they were like, okay, we're going to do the second lesson, which is entitled Our Heavenly Family. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. We are all children, like literal children of God. So we are all part of the same...
Yeah, spirit children is the way that they phrased it.
Yeah, so we're all part of the same spiritual or heavenly family. Kind of a nice sentiment. So one thing that they did at this meeting that was a little bit weird was they would like say something like, in the Book of Mormon, it tells us that we are all children of God. How does that make you feel? And I was like, why is that relevant?
Yeah, it was very like therapeutic kind of setting.
Yeah, but it was odd because I was like, do my feelings in any way affect the truth value of that statement? Like,
yeah,
like
but that's
why...
admittedly that's not exactly what they're looking for in this group. It's more of a like personal impact, how the Book of Mormon affects you in your life. So that was the focus of it, but I totally sympathize with what you're saying.
This is sort of my counter-apologetic side, so maybe this is a little too cynical, but it did kind of feel like they were like, here's this thing that's in the Book of Mormon. Now, I want to elicit an emotional reaction from you so that it will tie those two things together.
Yeah.
It will, so it'll sink in better, like that kind of thing. It felt like a little brainwashy, almost.
Yeah.
So that might be a little cynical. It might not be the main goal, but that's what it felt. But anyway, so we're all part of the same heavenly family, and that gives you inherent or perceived worth. I've heard that many, many a time, just from general Christians as well. Now, here's an interesting thing. So, apparently, before human beings were placed on the earth, there was a council in heaven to, like, figure out all the logistics and the planning and, you know, make sure it all ran smoothly.
Yeah, they had the cork board with the thumbtacks, and they were going through all the logistics of it and hiring contractors and subcontractors.
It was very much like, you know, A Beautiful Mind. You know, lots of string and push pins and pictures.
Yeah, or Grand Theft Auto 5.
Yeah, like that. So apparently during this council in heaven, they assigned families. So we were put here on the planet into families. Like, it was predetermined which families would exist in what form. So that was interesting.
Well, I like to think of it as like a pre-existence adoption lottery.
I guess so.
You know?
Like, you just draw a ticket.
Like Donald Trump won. Donald Trump won the birth lottery. And that's literally true.
So that was interesting. So reading through the book, I noticed something. It was kind of funny, but if you look at the bottom, there's a little footnote, and it doesn't relate to any of the text. It's not a citation. It says, for teachers, you do not need to teach everything in this chapter. As you are prayerfully prepared to teach, seek the Spirit's guidance to know which portions of the chapter you should cover and which questions you should ask. So
now that was written by somebody who didn't want to prepare lesson plans.
Right? Like, that's a lazy motherfucker right there.
Yeah, sneaky.
Yeah, like, apparently Jesus is integral to the planning stage in these small group meetings. He does all the legwork for you, so you really don't have to do much.
Yeah, well, he keeps the books. So, like, you have to go to Jesus every time you want to get this Mormon book, and he loans them out. He's like a librarian. You have to bring them back, or else you get a holy fine.
Oh, that makes sense. Jeez. Frickin' bureaucracy, man. Pain in the ass. Even when we're dead, we can't get away from it.
That's true. That is very true in this religion. We'll find that out later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So one of the other things they were talking about that I thought was interesting was this concept that we all existed in like a pre-life stage in heaven. Mm-hmm. And of course, this is when they did, divvied up families and the council and all that, but there was more to it than that. So apparently we all were born and grew up to maturity in heaven in what they call eternal mansions. So everybody gets a mansion in heaven. But, I mean, if everybody has a mansion, then nobody has a mansion, you know?
So our equivalent of a mansion would be like a a super mansion.
Yeah, like a mega mansion.
It would be like Luigi's Mansion.
Ultra mansion. Maximum over mansion.
Exactly.
So, yeah, apparently we were born and raised to maturity in heaven, and during that time, we actually developed all the same talents and characteristics to our personality that we possess here on the earth. So, for example, if you're really good at playing soccer, you were really good at playing soccer in heaven too. Or if you're really good at crossword puzzles, you spend a lot of time developing that talent in heaven. Like, that was what they were trying to explain to us.
And if you have a high alcohol tolerance,
you drank a lot. And there's alcohol in heaven too. That's kind of neat. I'm down with that.
I wonder if that carries over to like addictions and stuff like that. Like,
you did a lot of heroin.
I'm a sex addict. I must have been a spiritual sex addict.
So part of the explanation for this was like, apparently when we're put on this planet, there is a veil placed over our minds, so you can't remember what happened in your pre-life in heaven. And this is actually kind of one of the best Christian arguments, or like Christian-esque, kind of that community, that community. One of the best arguments I've heard of for free will, because basically what they're saying is, when you get to the planet, your test is to see whether or not you believe in Jesus, in Mormon Jesus, and you follow all the rules. Mm-hmm. And the reason they put a veil over your mind is because if you already know the truth of the Mormon church, of course you're going to follow all the rules and do what Jesus says, so you can go to the best possible heaven. And that actually makes sense.
Yeah. So, way to go, Mormons. Clap, clap.
Yeah, good job. You guys actually thought that out, because most of the time it's like, well, how come God doesn't just reveal himself? Oh, well, that would affect our free will. Well, no, it wouldn't, because in Christian doctrine, you got...
Yeah, we would be presented with actual evidence and be able to decide from there.
Well, I mean, the biggest criticism is, if you believe that there's a heaven and hell, and there's God and the devil, then the devil is somebody who has definitive knowledge of God's existence and still chose to disobey him. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't take away our free will, because it's entirely possible to know God exists and disobey him. So the whole argument is trash.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, the Mormons actually have a decent argument for free will. Mm-hmm. So that one, good job, guys.
Yeah, bravo.
Bravo. So this is at the point where we started talking about state patriarchs and what they called a patriarchal blessing.
Ah, yes.
So this was interesting. So apparently one of the duties of the state patriarch is when you reach a certain age, or this would also maybe happen if you're about to leave the country on a mission. I don't know if this happens more than once in your time at the Mormon Church, or if you only get one of these.
Well, I kind of got the impression that it was like an every time you want to do a major life decision thing.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, again, but it wasn't super clear, but it did seem like this could happen more than once. But basically what you do is you go to your state patriarch, mm-hmm. and he communes with Jesus right there in front of you, and then gives you a blessing, but it's not really a blessing. They said it's different for every person. So for some people, it could be advice. For example, the cute girl sitting next to me, she said that it was sort of like they were telling her how her life was going to be laid out, and this and that, and oh, you're going to do great things and shit like that.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy when they actually give you the advice on what
That's
to do.
actually what I said, because she was like, my patriarchal blessing said that, I was going to do this and this in my life, and it turns out it's coming true. And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, you're actively working towards that future. Of course it's coming true.
Yeah, and besides, like, Mormon upbringings are so, like, regimented that it's pretty easy to guess, like, oh, you're going to go on a mission trip.
Right. So that was interesting. So the other thing they say is that the patriarchal blessing is you learn a lot about yourself. That's usually a component where they tell you stuff about yourself. And I remember in our third chunk of that sacrament, the eldest guy, I think he was actually a president or a patriarch. I can't remember what his title was, but he was up there.
Yeah, he was something high
Yeah,
up.
he was up there. But
old guy.
He was talking about how when he received his blessing, his patriarchal blessing, the state patriarch told him things that he couldn't have possibly known. Now, when he said that, it kind of struck a chord in my mind. Mm-hmm. It reminded me of this funny little social experiment they did a while back. And I don't know if this has a proper term, but I call it the Zodiac effect. Because basically what they did is they took a room full of people and they told them, okay, so we've taken the best astrologers and woo magic people, and they've constructed a personal zodiac for every single person in this room. Now, what we want you to do is read this personal zodiac and then rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 how accurate it is for you personally. Mm-hmm. And so they hand them out, and everybody's amazed and like, wow, this is so great. You had like 9s, 10s, a couple of 8s in there. But for the most part, everybody's like, wow, this is spot on. And then they told everybody, okay, turn to your left and trade papers with the person on your left. And it was kind of quiet for a second as everybody was reading. Mm-hmm. And then everybody starts laughing because it's all the same fucking zodiac. They just printed like the same number of copies for the room, but they gave them all the same zodiac. So it's kind of this sort of self-bias that when people tell you things, you can mill it around in your own brain to make it fit the narrative of your life pretty accurately.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I highly doubt that these patriarchal prophecy blessing type things where they tell you what you're going to do in the future, I highly doubt that any of them are bad.
Yeah.
Like they're probably like, you're going to get a house and you're going to find a girlfriend or, whatever.
Well, that's the other thing. I think they're also like really vague. Like,
oh yeah.
You will have great wealth in your life. So even if you don't become rich, they'll be like, well, you have great spiritual wealth. Like, it'll be like that. They're going to be just vague enough to where you can kind of, tweak it to fit what's going on.
Yeah, they're fortune cookies.
Yeah, kind of like that. And then this is the point at which I was kind of like, okay, I get what they're trying to say. I'm bored, so I'm going to read through more of this book that they gave us. And so I kind of read ahead to try to kind of get what what the whole Mormon thing was about. And as I was reading ahead, this whole religion, it's completely different than your standard or what you would think of in Christianity, because typically what we're told in most sects of Christianity is there's this guy, his name is Jesus, generally a cool dude. He died on the cross and went to hell for 3 days, and turns out he's God, so you have to believe in him, and if you believe in him, you won't go to hell, and instead you'll go to heaven kind of thing. The Mormons took a different approach with this. It's almost analogous to Buddhism's Eightfold Path, like the Buddha's Eightfold Path, which for those of you who don't know a whole lot about Buddhism, the Eightfold Path was basically the Buddha explaining to you how he reached the point to where he would no longer suffer. So that's the thing, is the Buddha's not a deity. He's just a guy who figured out how to secede from suffering in his lifetime. So the Eightfold Path was the method by which he did that. And if you follow the steps he followed, apparently you can reach the same level of personal fulfillment in your life. The Mormons had something similar where if you do what Jesus did and you follow all the rules and do all the things, you can be like Jesus. You can become God, basically, and you can have your own planet and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't necessarily like, let's believe in Jesus because we don't want to go to hell and because we're going to be guilt-tripped into doing it because he, died on the cross and stuff. This is more like, I'm going to believe in Jesus because if I do the stuff he did, I can be God too. It's like a how-to book.
So then again, bravo, Mormons, because when it comes to religions, you've got this whole reward structure down pretty well.
That's a pretty badass incentive.
So the catch, though, is some of the things that I've heard. I don't know if this is completely true, but some of the things that I've heard are required to get this God status. Is that number 1, you have to be a male.
Yeah.
2, you have to be a married male. 3, you have to be a married male with children. Mm-hmm. And 4, you have to be a married male with children who tithes every month and does all the Mormon things.
Yeah.
Or every week.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's basically, so like any Christian listeners who hear this, it's basically what you're already doing, except you don't get to be God when you die.
Yeah. Sucks for you, bitches.
Drew the short straw on that one, so that sucks. I made some other notes about some of the stuff he said that I found questionable. Mm-hmm. For example, he was like, I think it was because he was saying, like, if you become like God, you can even have your own little section of the universe that you're in charge of, kind of deal. And he was saying, to kind of like fit this narrative, he was saying, in science, we're finding out more and more about... We're finding out more and more about how the universe is infinite. And I was like, no, we're not.
Wrong.
That's not a thing. The universe is definitely finite in its space. So I don't know which science journal he's reading about. Maybe the ancient Greek one, but
yeah, it's not even infinitely expanding. It's like you get to an end point,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's also a giant black hole in the middle of the universe that's eating up matter almost as quickly as it's expanding. So there's that too. Like eventually we're all gonna die. So
checkmate, Mormons.
Checkmate, bitches. So we go on. There's the other thing he said that I hear a lot from mostly fundamentalists, but I still have a huge problem with it, is that he basically said, like, we're all sinners and we have all sinned, so we're all equal. Like, we're all on equal footing. Oh. And I was like, no, we're not. That's bullshit.
Yeah, it's like saying I'm on an equal footing with you, Michael. Shit.
Well, like, it's basically saying having, like, thought crime, like looking at his cute daughter with lust is the same as molesting and killing babies. Those are not two equivalent things, okay? One of those is way worse.
Yeah, so let me play Mormon's advocate here a little bit, because I think what they mean by that when they say that all sins are equal is that they're kind of cutting it off a little bit too early for us on the outside to understand, but that what they're actually meaning to say is more like all sins are equally damning.
I guess, but I mean...
But that's still shitty.
It is, yeah, it's still shitty. So, like, you could... In normal Christian theology, you could go to hell just the same as a child rapist if you, like, cursed and used blasphemy. That's retarded.
Or stole a fucking candy bar when you were 10.
Yeah, like, it's ridiculous. This whole concept that God is like this all-or-nothing guy, he just looks at all sin as if it's all equally bad, with no reverence to nuance or gray areas or degrees of intensity. No, fuck that. If it's bad, then it's as bad as the worst possible crime.
Yeah, so basically, God is like a traffic cop in the city where we grew up.
Yeah.
Like any little infraction will get you a ticket.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So, I thought that was fucking stupid. I was like, you know what? Fuck that. And the other thing I kind of chuckled about was he talked about how we all have choices, and this is when he was talking about our test on the planet, whether we choose to follow the rules and believe in Jesus and everything. He was like, Adam and Eve had a choice too. And I was like, well... They didn't really understand consequences or right from wrong, so was that really a choice? I mean, It's not really a choice when you take away all of your ability to evaluate choices.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of context that you can take away from a certain situation when you're asking somebody to decide on something.
Yeah.
If you take away context and all that, there's a certain point where it gets to... you don't have all the information, so you're not really making a good choice, or you're not really making a choice. You're kind of being forced. Like, for example, in the Garden of Eden, with the fruit that they took, like they were persuaded by the serpent to eat this fruit. And the deception kind of muddies the water, I think, when it comes to, them being able to make a choice. Because like they're not presented with all of the evidence. They're presented on one side. It's basically like watching Fox News and voting.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That's true. So that was the last thing in here. That pretty much covers pretty much all the meeting. The third part of the sacrament, the last hour, not a whole lot to report on that, mostly because it was...
Yeah, not so much worth talking about, because first of all, it was just a continuation of the last week's meeting, which obviously we weren't there for, so we didn't understand any of it. And then other than that, it was kind of just like a whole bunch of old guys talking about shit. So
yeah, I mean, so it seemed to me like this was a small group kind of thing that, it's like in this pod... They would do, outreach programs and they'd get together and plan stuff and do things like that. So that's what a big part of the meeting seemed like. They were just planning out logistics and talking about, oh, we need to get this done and do this and how we can approach this. And then the second half of it was just reading an article. That was it. We read an article, and it wasn't even a good article. It was kind of a shitty article. It was that one about the one of the presidents. He went to Africa and then presented the Book of Mormon to the African priest, and the African priest was so excited to have New Testaments about Jesus, and it was dumb. It was stupid.
Yeah. So one thing that was kind of productive that came out of this meeting, though, is we found out that the Mormons actually have a pretty nifty app.
Oh yeah,
and this app is called
Gospel Library.
Yeah, Gospel Library. And basically, it's just a compendium of all things Mormon. Mm-hmm. So they have like audio and transcripts of the conferences that these guys have, and all the scriptures, and some presidential prophecy proclamations or whatever they're called, and even their hymnals and stuff like that. So
everything.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is a pretty cool resource that I think more religions should embrace this type of.
But see, no, that's where they fucked up.
For our sake, I mean.
Yeah, well, for our sake. But see, that's where they fucked up, though. See, if they followed like the Church of Scientology and instead made everybody pay for that, oh man, they could have cashed in on that shit.
Yeah, it was a free
They totally
app.
fucked that up. You know how much money they just passed on?
Yeah, but with mandatory tithing, I doubt these guys are hurting for money.
So I think they're fine. But yeah, so that was pretty much all the high points of our visit to the Mormon Church. As of now, we have not yet had our interview with the missionary. So when we were there, a couple of the missionaries took us aside, talked to us, had some jovial conversation, and kind of like a snake in the grass, they sprung and shot in there and went, "Hey, do you guys have a Book of Mormon?" Like, yeah, of course we have a fucking Book of Mormon at our house. So, of course we were like, no, we don't have a Book of Mormon. They're like, oh, great. When can we come by your house and give you one? So.
No. Okay, so Michael, this is an important part of the story.
Okay.
So they were like, oh, do you guys have a Book of Mormon? And we both said no. And the guy was like, oh, shucks. Well, I can't find one here. Do you mind if I come by and give it to you?
Yeah, I forgot about that. You're right.
Yeah, it was pretty great.
Totally
I like that.
We should have just stood there and demanded that they find a Book of Mormon in the church for us right then and there. Be like, nope, I want one right now. Now.
Pretty crafty. I have to give them props for that.
Sneaky.
And so what are your final takeaways from this Mormon visit, Michael?
Overall, it was a pretty positive experience. The next thing we're going to kind of talk to you guys about is once we have our interview with the Mormon, I'm going to video Skype in Ryan because he's in San Antonio right now. So we're going to sit down with a missionary and we'll bring that to you guys. But overall, so far, pretty positive impression of the Mormons. Like, I remember during the Woodlands Church episode, you were saying, like, hey, if I have a deathbed conversion, I might just go for that. I might go for that, but, like, for Mormons, though. Like, yeah. I might do the Mormon version of that, because they seem to have the best payoffs. Like, regardless if you're, like, good or bad, or believe in Jesus or not, if you don't believe in Jesus, you go to basically like spiritual Sunday school and you just keep learning until you can eventually get to heaven. Or if you believe in Jesus, like a deathbed confession, you go to be God and have a planet and stuff. It's, it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, it's kind of a nifty little win-win situation right there.
So I might go for the Mormon conversion, deathbed conversion there at the end.
Yeah. Well, we got a good, 10 or 15 years to plan that, so.
Yeah, right? Well, I mean, of course, all religions are, like, equally likely of being right or wrong. So, I mean, if you're going to hedge your bets, you may as well hedge your bets with the best possible result.
You gotta weigh your options here, though. Become God, have your own planet, or get 72 raisins or whatever.
72 raisins, or just hang out with God and like, depending on which scripture of the Bible, sometimes you're just sitting there basking in his glory. Come on, how fucking boring is that? Like,
yeah, you just gotta sing for the rest of eternity. Like, what if my lungs give out? Holy shit.
How many people enjoy going to church and being like, oh yeah, hymns, I love these. And it's like, oh fuck, I love singing about God. Imagine doing that for eternity.
Oh my god.
That would suck.
No, thank you.
I'd rather be God and have a planet.
And by the way, while we're on the subject, Streets of Gold is a horrible idea.
Oh yeah, that's man.
Gold. It would probably get all tarnished and dented and stuff like that. Because gold is a very soft and pliable metal.
That it is, yeah, that's true.
I mean,
that's why they used to use it for coinage, because it was so easy to work with. But imagine if your streets were like that. Like, just imagine driving. Like...
Well, maybe that's the thing. Like, everybody has wings and they fly in heaven.
Oh, so nobody ever touches the ground. So why is it there?
I hate the idea that Donald Trump decorated heaven.
Donald Trump has the same decorum taste as, like, every Persian guy ever.
I saw a meme that said that that his apartment is decorated like if a 19th century French whore won the lottery.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so my final impressions of this, just real quick, is I gotta say, again, bravo, Mormons, because... this might be a product of where we are, because even though this is a very conservative town that we live in, it's also very rich, so people don't usually take religion as seriously here. So that means it's a lot more liberal, and, I guess religious people would say it's a little bit more wishy-washy. So the sermons, like the culmination or the accumulation of the sermons, the message was basically good humanitarian stuff and a lot of charity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also self-improvement and self-reliance and all that good stuff. So I got to say bravo for that.
Absolutely.
Even though there was a subtext of like, because Jesus.
Yeah.
That's to be expected. But I think my prevailing thought throughout this whole thing was that if I had to be surrounded by a lot of religious people, I would much rather be surrounded by Mormons than by Pentecostals.
Oh, yeah. True that. And especially more so than Catholics.
Catholics are just boring.
Yeah,
sometimes they are hot, though.
That's true. But I mean,
yeah,
getting through those pearly gates is just such a pain in the ass. God. Oh, but Jesus, no, dude. My Jesus is a cool dude. He'd be okay with it. He's like, yeah, get it in there, man. Get your dick wet. Alright, so in our last episode, we got the introduction to 23 Minutes in Hell. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at Proof of Heaven, and we're going to get an introduction of that today. So I'm the one doing 23 Minutes of Hell, and Ryan is doing Proof of Heaven. So let's see what Ryan found.
Well, okay, so first of all, there is a section right before the book actually starts where it's called Advanced Praise, which... I've never seen that before. It's kind of shitty, I guess. So it's just quotes from other people, and I thought a couple of them were kind of funny. This one is from Bruce Grayson, who's co-editor of a handbook of near-death experiences.
Oh, okay.
Says, Dr. Alexander's neuroscience career taught him that near-death experiences are brain-based illusions, and yet his personal experience left him dumbstruck.
Okay.
And this is a theme that's going to go through the reading, is like, he was this liberally educated neurosurgeon who believed that, like, secular science had all the answers. That's
not a trope or anything, it's not.
Yeah, and then this one is from Reverend Michael R. Sullivan, who's the rector
Rectum.
of Holy Innocents Episcopal Church. It says, Eben Alexander's masterpiece is a story for scientists, skeptics, believers, and seekers. Read it for a foretaste of something beyond the veil, beyond our dreams, and beyond our wildest imaginations.
Well, he's half right.
Yeah.
It is beyond imagination. That.
Okay. So, starting out, it kind of just, he recounts when he was a kid, and he was having these dreams, I guess like daydreams, like sometimes when you look up at the stars and you kind of feel like you're floating. I think that's what he's talking about here.
Okay.
And so he developed an interest in flying, and he just kind of felt like, he describes it as a homesickness for the air. So he wanted to become a pilot. And one thing that I noticed that kind of runs through a theme through this introduction is that he's in North Carolina, I believe.
Yeah.
So he's constantly trying to get out, like by flying or by jumping to his death. Or,
so North Carolina's not a fun place to be. This is what you're telling me,
right? And yeah, I can sympathize with that, because if I lived there, I would probably jump out of planes too. So that's what he did when he went to the University of North Carolina. He joined the sports parachuting or skydiving team, as normal people call it.
Sports parachuting.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, when I first read this, though, I was like, I see where this is going.
Yeah, I feel that too. Like, oh, I miss being in heaven.
Yeah, it's like he was going to fucking fall flat on his face and have his NDE there. So he made like 365 parachute jumps in college, and he was doing like formation jumps with a lot of other people. And it's like when they fall and they all grab hands and make shapes and shit like that.
Yeah.
So there was this one time when he was jumping, and it was in a group of people, and there were some new people, and one of them just fucking loses control and kind of smashes into the formation and knocks everybody loose.
Oh shit.
And thankfully, yeah, everybody is fine though.
Good.
But then this guy, he calls him Chuck, he kind of guides himself to a place where he thinks is safe to deploy his parachute, which happens to be right under Eben Alexander. which when you're falling at that speed and somebody's falling below you,
Yeah.
it creates a low pressure stream sort of, so you kind of just like barrel down.
Yeah.
And it can cause that's how a lot of injuries happen. So that's what happened to this guy, to Eben Alexander. And this part right here, he says, "He must not see me. The thought barely had time to go through my head before Chuck's colorful pilot chute blossomed out of his backpack, and his chute caught the 120 mile per hour breeze coming around him and shot straight towards me." So he says, if this hit him directly, both our bodies would essentially explode. And
I don't know about that.
It would just be, I mean, maybe. It'd be really bloody.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not like they would pop like bubble wrap. There'd probably be quite a bit of, carnage, but I don't know about explode. I think that's a bit generous.
But, I mean, it probably has similar force to getting hit by a car, like going at speed.
Sure, yeah.
You know? So he was able to maneuver his way around the parachute, though, in a split second, according to his account. And this is kind of the jerk reaction, like you don't have time to think about it, you only have time to react.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what he did, but we will see soon that wasn't just some fancy secular brain thinking he did. It was something much more magical, I guess.
Oh, all right.
So he couldn't figure out how he had reacted. He says he reacted in milliseconds to a situation that, had I actually had the time to think about it, it would have been much too complex for me to deal with. And yet, I had dealt with it. We both landed safely. It was as if, presented with a situation that required more than its usual ability to respond, my brain had become, for a moment, superpowered.
Okay, no. So basically, this is kind of the same mechanics as martial artists use when we're doing combat training. So basically, the way I train people is I put them in a simulation where I get, other people to attack them in a way that they're probably going to be attacked in reality. And the point is that when you see that stimulus coming, you don't want to sit there and think about, oh, what angle is it coming from? Or, what punch is that? Or is it going to hit me in the head or in the ribs? Or, you don't want to have to think about it. You just see it and you have a pre-programmed reaction, an instinct to just go and get in there and defend yourself. So if he's done how many parajumps at this point? Like 300 or something?
He said 365, yeah.
Yeah, he's probably got some ingrained instincts just from experience. It's not like it was magic.
Yeah, I mean, am I to believe that this is the only time that something went wrong?
Right? Or that they didn't train him for things to go wrong? They don't just push you out of a plane and go, good luck! Like, you have to receive some training for that.
Yeah. So, then he says, I finally chalked it up to the fact that the brain is a truly extraordinary device.
Yeah, it is.
Well, yeah, he's right.
He's right, yeah.
But more extraordinary than we can even guess.
Oh.
I realize now the real answer to the question is much more profound. But I had to go through a complete metamorphosis of my life and worldview to glimpse the answer.
Oh, God.
What sprang into action the second Chuck's parachute started to open was another, much deeper part of me. A part that could move so fast because it was not stuck in time at all.
What?
The way that the brain and body are. And he says of this part, it's not only the smartest part of us, but it's the deepest part as well. Yet for most of my adult life, I was unable to believe it. And then the next part, I'm a neurosurgeon, so I know my shit.
Okay. You know your shit.
So he gives his qualifications, and his qualifications do seem to be pretty lofty.
Yeah.
So he was in developmental neurosurgery, and he did stuff like he developed advanced technical procedures like stereotactic radiosurgery. I don't know where the fuck that is.
Yeah.
And also helped develop magnetic resonance image guided neurological procedures, instrumental in repairing hard to treat brain conditions like tumors and vascular disorders.
Interesting.
So bravo.
Yeah, I mean, good for him. At least he got that. But I mean, there's plenty of really intelligent people who will believe things for bad reasons. It has nothing to do with your intelligence or your IQ. It's, how good are your critical thinking skills, which clearly his are very, very poor. So.
And then on November 10th, 2008, at age 54, my luck seemed to run out. So he got E. coli, I believe, in his spine.
Yeah, I remember hearing something about that. It was he had E. coli, and I forget where it was, but I think I remember reading it was like a medical complication that they had to put him under and do some emergency surgery or something like that. And that's when he, had his experience, something like that.
Yeah. So apparently he was brain dead, in his words, for a week, and he said,
"What? For a week?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Holy shit!
Yeah. He said his brain crashed like a computer, I guess.
Did they have to unplug it and plug it back in again?
Oh yeah. Well, Michael, so he has his explanation for that seemingly odd brain death.
Okay.
He said, mine in some ways was a perfect storm of near-death experiences. As a practicing neurosurgeon with decades of research on my hands, in the operating room behind me, I was a better than average position to judge not only the reality, but also the implications of what happened to me. Hey Oprah, I'm looking at you.
So when he's brain dead, he's qualified to evaluate what's going on with his brain?
I guess in retrospect is implied there.
Oh, okay.
those implications are tremendous beyond description. My experience showed me that the death of the body and the brain are not the end of consciousness, that human experience continues beyond the grave. More important, it continues under the gaze of a God who loves and cares about each of us, and where the universe itself and all beings within it are ultimately going.
Oh boy.
Most boring part of the chapter right there.
Alrighty.
Okay. So he says that this story is so foreign to ordinary understanding. It's not something he can simply shout from the rooftops. It's gonna take some time, you know.
Okay. Because it's too deep for us to understand all at once. I get it. Yeah,
right.
Because we're not capable, I guess.
Yeah, I heard it starts off with him like riding a butterfly with his sister. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm especially eager to tell my story to the people who might have heard stories similar to mine and wanted to believe them, but have not been able to fully do so. So people who are credulous.
Yeah, basically.
And that's it for the intro. But I'll tell you, Michael, I did a little bit of preliminary research on the author. And we'll get more into this later, but apparently it's exactly what you think it is.
Oh, goody.
Like, as soon as this book came out, he was on Oprah. He was interviewed by Fox and Friends. That's prestigious. He was on, I think he spoke to Deepak Chopra and all that, and he made quite a bit of cash.
Oh, yeah. I remember. That was one of the reasons that even Bill Maher was talking about him, is because the book was so ridiculously popular. Mm-hmm. Everybody was buying this shit when it came out.
Yeah. By the way, did you get this book from a used bookseller? Because I don't want to... I feel like it's like blood money.
I think I found that at Barnes & Noble, and I was like, oh, okay, let's see what this is. And then I read like a couple of pages, and I was like, yep, I'm going to buy this. This is just too ridiculous.
Michael, you gave him money?
Well, in fairness, we get to make fun of it now, so I think it was money well spent.
Okay. Yeah, so anyway, there was stuff that I saw about his experience. Like before that happened, he had been suspended from doing surgery, and there was a malpractice suit for $3 million where apparently he didn't disclose some of the potential side effects of fucking brain surgery.
Oh shit, come on now. That's like rule number 1. Jesus.
Yeah, I feel like it should be implied.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just for, like, not being a douche, like, you would want to tell people, hey, this surgery has some risks. Or just like, no, you'll be fine.
So my point in this, though, is that he seems to be the innocent party when it comes to that lawsuit. I think he got screwed.
Oh, did he?
Like, maybe he should have been a little bit better at, disclosing all of the fucking things that could happen during fucking brain surgery.
Well, yeah.
Like, it's fucking brain surgery. That's like one of the common metaphors that we have for doing something that's really hard and complicated.
Yeah.
Not a good story on either side. This woman, she had, I guess, a tumor or something like that, and the surgery itself went completely fine, but afterwards, she was just numb on half of her face. So she sued him for malpractice. And he settled, which, there's a lot of legal stuff there that I don't really understand. Okay. But I feel like, he just kind of needed to reinvent himself and have a new marketing campaign to get money after this all happened.
Right, so it's like a rebranding scheme.
Yeah. Yeah, so now credulous people and people like you are buying this book and giving him money. Way to go.
Yeah, well, to be fair, it was like $5, so it's not like he got much out of it. After you pay the publisher and stuff, he probably got like a couple of dollars, so
yeah,
I don't feel too bad about it.
Yeah, if that, but...
If that, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess next week we will do another reading from 23 Minutes in Hell. That is the beginning of the first chapter. I believe it's called The Cell, so that'll be exciting. All right, let's...
I hope there's a lot of footnotes.
There probably will be. Thanks for listening to the Unholy Generation podcast with your hosts Mike
and Ryan. If you want to contact us, send us an email at unholypod@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, like our episodes, subscribe to our channel, and share us on all your social media.
Follow us on Twitter at UnholyGens, like us on Facebook at the Unholy Generation Podcast, and follow us on SoundCloud.
Tune in to our next show, where we will be interviewing a missionary from the Mormon Church.